peritoneum already. And the peritoneum, I'm going to lift up bits of the peritoneum. You're showing them this one, Shinora.
You can see here.
Okay. This is a fold of peritoneum. Yes. And as you can see, it's quite thin because this is 2 layers. And in certain parts of the body, the abdomen particularly rather, the peritoneum is reflected onto different parts of the viscous and is quite adherent. Like over the liver there, or over the intestines, it's quite adherent there. In other areas, it's more loosely applied, as in this instance here, which I'm lifting off from the posterior aspect of the lower anterior abdominal wall. This is the anterior abdominal wall. You can see the peritoneum has been somewhat stripped off, so it's loosely attached there. Now, this peritoneum has a single layer of flattened mesothelial cells. On a histology, you'd see it looks just like a layer of endothelial cells. To the viscous to which it is attached, or at our wall that is attached to, there's loose or dense connective tissue. There's this I'm holding here, connective tissue that keeps the peritoneum closely attached to the viscous. And within that layer of connective tissue, it is said that there are stem cells. There are stem cells within that layer. And these stem cells will generate, when needed, more peritoneal, endothelial, mesothelial cells. That's important because when you operate within it, there's a bone, etc. Peritoneum is breached. You want this peritoneum to heal quickly. And it is said, all things being equal, that means good surgery, good technique, no infection, etc., etc. Within 24 hours, the peritoneum will heal and complete what it was before the surgery. An additional feature. When we resect body like this in the small intestine that I'm holding up here, yeah, you see the small intestine? When we resect it and rejoin it, or reanastomose ends of the small bowel together, this peritoneum, as it heals, that covers the small intestine, within 24 hours, as I said, all things being equal, within 24 hours, the peritoneum cells will fuse together and heal back and ensure airtight and watertight seal. You got me? The peritoneum heals usually within 24 hours and will ensure that you get an air and watertight seal so that there will be no leakage of bowel contents, for instance. And that's important. Unfortunately, in a few instances, not very common, we'll have leakage. And the same principle will apply. Areas of the alimentary tract digestive system, whereas there's no peritoneum, when surgery is done on it, all things being equal, those parts of the gut, alimentary tract, without any peritoneal lining, like say the esophagus or the lower rectum, they are more prone to leakage. Yes? So you see where nature has been good to us, the surgeons, yes, and the patient. So that's an overview of the significance of the peritoneum. Now, this peritoneum, where is it derived from? You remember in your early embryology, you had a lecture on the embryology last semester and the peritoneal cavity earlier this semester here. The mesoderm divides into 3. The paraxial against the midline, the intermediate plate mesoderm, as it says intermediate, and then the lateral plate mesoderm. It's this lateral plate mesoderm now which differentiates into 2. somatic and splanchnic mesoderm. And it is from this that the peritoneum is derived. I've been formed the somatic and splanchnic mesoderm. Cells now migrate to surround the seal of a cavity, and these cells will give rise to further parietal peritoneum or the visceral peritoneum. Now, what is the parietal peritoneum? The parietal peritoneum is that layer of peritoneum which lines the outer layers, like the anterior abdominal wall and the parietes. And it's for this reason it's called the parietal peritoneum. Yes, parietal peritoneum. That peritoneum that lines, say, the gut here, small intestine, for instance, here, is referred to as the visceral peritoneum. Yes? So we have two types, the parietal peritoneum here, or the visceral peritoneum covering the gut. That over the gut is quite adherent, and it's difficult to peel off. Now, why do we need these layers? The intestines, in real life, they are moving within their peritoneal abdominal cavity freely, like a snake in the grass, yes? And these peritoneal cells, they secrete a small amount of liquid, yes? Just like in the pericardium in the heart, the serous pericardium, a small amount of fluid to allow the free movement as a lubricant. So that's the significance of it. Now, the blood supply of the parietal or the visceral peritoneum, yes, will be from the adjacent parietes or the blood supply to the intestines, yes. And the nerve supply, parietal peritoneum is very sensitive because it's going to be innervated by somatic nerves. And the somatic nerves are related to that part of the body soma to which it is represented. For instance, you all know now that at the level of the umbilicus, this nerve innervation there is T10, is that right? T10. And from the epigastrium down is from like T6 or some say 5, some say 7. But say T6 to T10 from the upper to the sternum down to the umbilicus. So T10. So it's precise and exact. Yes. However, the visceral peritoneum that covers the gut, for instance, the sensation is not by somatic, it's by the autonomic nervous system. And because of that, as you've heard and learned so far, the pain there is minimal. We can cut the peritoneum in the gut if the patient was awake and they wouldn't feel it. We can stick it and they would not feel it. What they will feel is when the gut becomes distended. Yes, when the gut becomes distended and the peritoneum is not pushed and stretched, they'll feel pain sensation. Yes, or when there's noxious substances like pus or other gut enzymes coming into contact with this, they are there. Okay, so that's somatic, and the pain innervation is going to go by both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. Just for you guys, just as to help you in your future exams, you can understand the upper abdomen, the somatic sensation, right, by somatic nerves. However, within the pelvis, the innervation is provided by the obturator nerve. You remember the obturator nerve? Yes, L2, 3, 4, the anterior divisions of the ventral ram. Now, having given a bigger overview now of the peritoneal cavity, let's get into more a finer detail. You've done the anterior abdominal wall with Mr. Gardner, and you should have had a lab with him of the anterior abdominal wall. That's this entire structure, including its posterior surface. Yes, including its posterior surface. And the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall, from top to bottom, presents certain important features that you should remember and know about. Now, before I go into the fine details of these, I would like to inform you, and you should have been informed by now, that the gut, yes, the gut, in its development, is as it were, it invaginates into the greater coelomic cavity and is suspended anteriorly to the anterior abdominal wall and posteriorly to the posterior abdominal wall by folds, and they refer those on the posterior abdominal wall like this as the dorsal mesogastrium, and that anteriorly, which you're not seeing here, is referred to as the ventral mesogastrium. In the gut, the abdomen, most of the ventral mesogastrium would have disappeared. That is the ventral mesogastrium, except in its upper part. And in the upper part, we have this structure here. This is the liver. It's not looking a nice color of water machine, but this is the liver. And this structure here, are you there with me, guys? What is the structure I'm holding up? Are you hearing me? That's right. This is the so-called falciform ligament. It's a sickle-shaped structure that extends from the back of the umbilicus. You can see the umbilicus has been left in position there, in situ, we call it. And extending from it to the liver, as you can see, to the liver, is this. This is part of the beginning of the falciform ligament. It's a sickle-shaped fold. Yeah. That is a falciform ligament. Yes. So extended from the umbilicus, attached to the anterior abdominal wall in its upper half, and then it's going towards the liver, as you can well see there. Yeah. Good. That's the falciform ligament. Now, it has a free edge, and I'm sure you can all now see within this free edge, there's a thickened structure. Yes, there's a thickened structure called the ligamentum teres. What is the ligamentum teres? It's the obliterated remains of the left umbilical vein. It's carrying oxygenated blood in the utero, in the fetus. It's carrying oxygenated blood through this thing here, going towards the liver, as you can see there. It's going towards the liver, ligamentum teres. And within the liver, it joins up with the umbilical part of the left portal vein. And still within the liver, immediately opposite to this entrance of the left umbilical vein, immediately opposite that, into the umbilical portion of the left portal vein, is another vessel called the ductus venosus. And the ductus venosus is carrying this oxygenated blood. It has been mixed up with a little bit of venous. blood from the liver, but primarily still oxygenated blood back to the inferior vena cava. Yes? And the inferior vena cava is carrying back the blood into the right atrium. Yes? And remember when I did the heart with you, there's a structure within the right atrium that separates this oxygenated blood, directing it to the foramen ovale, separating that oxygenated blood from the rest of the deoxygenated blood that's coming from the superior vena cava, for instance. And you remember the name of this structure that directs this oxygenated blood to the foramen ovale? I think you still have the cardiovascular system disturbed as well. You remember that structure that I told you? Yes, it's called the intravenous tubercle of Lowe. I'm not going to be showing you that today. The intravenous tubercle of Lowe. So this is the falciform with the ligament teres or obliterated left umbilical. There's only one. The right one had regressed very early in life. Now, if we have to remove parts of the liver also, we might have to divide the falciform ligament, as you can see here, and we have to divide the ligamentum teres there. In real life at surgery, if we have to divide this structure here, the ligamentum teres, it is advisable that you ligate both ends, this end and the opposite end coming from the umbilicus, because in some instances it remains patent, and it wouldn't be a good idea to leave a patent vessel untied. Okay, so that's one of the things with the falciform ligament. I think, can you see through with the camera some little veins there? Are you seeing them? With I don't know if you've seen some veins within them. I don't want to say, I can see running here, but it don't stretch. You can see them now? Yes, you can see them, right? You see the veins? What are these veins often called? They are more prominent in cirrhosis of the liver with portal hypertension, and the portal veins and its tributaries become quite dilated. What are these veins called? No? They are called Sapp's veins, S-A-P-P-E. So when we open the abdomen, as in this instance here, we get into the general peritoneal cavity. But in addition to this, rather perplexing or puzzling are two extensions of this general large peritoneal cavity. One of them you have been exposed already when Mr. Gardner did the inguinal cavity, preceding in the early development, preceding this descent of the testis, or even if it's not going to be a boy, going down the inguinal canal, preceding, what was the name of the vein? Sappy, S-A-P-P-E-Y. Preceding the descent of the testicle was a portion of the general peritoneal cavity. What did we call that one again? That portion preceding the descent of the testicle into the scrotum. What did we call that extension of the peritoneal cavity? And sometimes it persists suddenly gives to hernia. The deep ring, going through the deep ring, down here the deep ring, as my finger is going, is a little extension of the general peritoneal cavity there. And what is this called? That's covering my finger. This is the peritoneum. What is this called? That precedes the testicle. It always happens, whether male or female. and it always precedes the testicle, if it's a male. Yes, man. It's the processus vaginalis. It's the processus vaginalis. It usually remains obliterated. It becomes obliterated in majority of us and give rise to no problem. You got me? So that is the processus vaginalis. Similarly, within the peritoneal cavity, you can imagine you have a big balloon. You can imagine you have a big balloon, and then you push, invaginate your finger into the balloon. It's like a diverticle. And this happens in real life. And that part now we refer to as the lesser omentum. The lesser omentum. Just to give you an idea where you are, because you've never seen much of these things before. This thickening area is the pylorus of the stomach. I'm rolling up the stomach there.
Someone's asking where the processus vaginalis is located.
Where the processus vaginalis is located, did you not go to Mr. Gardner's lecture on the inguinal canal? Because that's one of the important structures there. Because if it does not become obliterated and remain patent, the little boy, when he cries and bawls like we bawl out, like we love to do, then they'll get some of the peritoneal fluid going down, and they'll have what they call a hydrocele. Yeah. And as the little boy gets bigger, and that processes, etc., gets bigger, then the small intestine will slide out to give rise to a hernia. We said it always precedes this descent of the testicle. Yeah? Even if the testis does not descend, it always precedes everything. Okay, the processus vaginalis. Make sure you understand that. Good. The other invagination we said will give rise to the lesser sac, because we are entering into the large greater peritoneal cavity. And we were highlighting, you have the liver here, this solid thing here is the pylorus, because this is the stomach. You can see some gallbladder here, which I'm holding. And the invagination, I don't know if my camera needs it. Try and move this out. Invagination of the general peritoneal cavity in itself, where my finger is going there, is called the adytos, the entrance of the lesser sac. Yeah? The adytos of the lesser sac. And you can see you can see my finger there coming through up here. You see my finger? It's in the lesser sac. Yeah? So this is the adytos to the lesser sac. Yeah? Good. Understand that? We'll come back to that. So, the falciform ligament, having approached the liver in an oblique direction, you can see there, soon divides into a right leaflet and the left leaflet. And the right leaflet, this is the diaphragm, by the way, it will continue up. And if I should push my hand like this, as I'm doing, I can't go no further because it's stuck. Something is blocking the hand from going back. Yeah? You see that in the back there? The reflection of the peritoneum from the liver onto the diaphragm there prevents the hand from going further back. Okay? That happens on the right side as on the, okay, it's even clear on the left hand side. You can see the left leaflet now comes. And if I should push my finger here, it's blocked. Because why? The peritoneum is now reflected from the liver onto the diaphragm there. That's clear? You see that? Okay? It's reflected there. but I can get my hand behind there, behind the liver, and come from above, and my two hands will nearly come to touch, but they do not really touch because of the reflection of the peritoneum. In this instance here, upper aspect here, from off of the liver to the diaphragm, and below inferiorly, from the liver, there's a bulging structure there. You can see this bulging structure. See this bulging structure there? That is the kidney. That is the kidney. Now, to appreciate better what's going on here, I brought this liver, a smaller liver. Here we have the gallbladder. Here we have some remnants of the falciform ligament. And it would have separated into the right leaflet and the left leaflet. If we follow the right leaflet, superiorly here, and anteriorly here, we see this ligament here. And this is referred to as the right coronary anterior or superior leaflet. Okay, you got that? This is the right coronary ligament. And this leaflet is the anterior or superior. The two terms are interchangeable. So for you now, I'm going to use the word anterior superior leaflet. And it's reflected at this point here, from the liver to the diaphragm. And as it goes further out, it comes to this point here, where it then turns back. It then turns back from lateral to medial and proceeding to a lower level, as you can see here. It comes down to a lower level. And this leaflet is referred to as the right coronary ligament. It's posterior inferior ligament. Yeah, you got that? So this is coronary ligament, but it's the anterior superior aspect, because as you can see, it's anterior to there. And this one is the posterior leaflet there. It's posteriorly placed. This one tends to come a little bit more at a higher level, so it's more superior than this one. So it's called superior, anterior superior, posterior inferior. And where there's this turning back at this point here, there's usually their well-defined shaped ligament, so-called right triangular ligament. This is the right triangular ligament, yeah? And this area now of the liver here, between all of this area, is devoid of peritoneum. And because of that, it is referred to as the bare area of the liver. The boundaries, it's supposed to be triangular shaped, this bare area. Its base is formed by the bed for the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava should be, as you can see this structure there, it's lying in there. So that's the bed of the inferior vena cava. The apex is the right triangular ligament, and its triangle is completed by the anterior superior and the posterior inferior. Posterior inferior leaflet of the coronary ligament. This area, no peritoneum, just connective tissue that binds it to the undersurface of the right crust of the diaphragm. Yeah? So that's clear? Similarly, on the left-hand side now, it's a little different. The left leaflet, which I'm going to be showing you now, it's reflected at this point here onto the left crust of the diaphragm there. It forms a so-called left triangular ligament, and then it goes back medially So these two leaflets are in close opposition. So some people refer to them as the same anterior superior and posterior inferior leaflet of the left coronary ligament. But some people just should call it the left coronary ligament. You got me? With its left triangular ligament. There is no mere area here. Okay? And then it continues behind to the liver. So you got that? Make sure you understand that. Okay? What was the breathing gallbladder? Okay. Now, when you get to the posterior aspect of the liver, which I'm going to be flipping like that, it has a number, this peritoneum has a number of infoldings into the liver, because the liver develops within the ventral mesogastrium and the septum transversum. Yeah, it develops within that. We see here now the ligamentum teres, and as it approaches up to the liver, it runs in a groove for the ligamentum venosum. Right? That's the groove for the ligamentum venosum. At the upper end, almost in a straight line, there should be another groove there for the ductus venosus, ligamentum ductus venosum. Yeah? Where all of the structures to the liver enter and leave the liver, right at this juncture, is referred to as the porta hepatis. Porta, the entrance to the liver, porta hepatis. This green thing is the gallbladder. This little thing here is a cystic duct, and it will drain into the hepatic duct, going down. I'm not going to go into the finer details of the liver because it's on the peritoneal cavity we are. So posteriorly, we said that the peritoneum is reflected from the liver over to this bulging structure there, and that bulging structure is the right kidney. The right adrenal gland should be about the superior medial aspect of it. And there we have some fluid in this area here. When we're sick and we're lying down in bed, which is the usual situation, when you look at the pelvis, you see that there's a brim of the pelvis here, and then there is a leading gutter running up on either side of both the ascending colon and on the side of the descending colon. There is a lateral and a medial. On either side of the ascending colon, this is the ascending colon. And if I should show you the descending colon on this side, you get a similar arrangement, yeah? Over here we have the descending colon, yeah? And on either side, there is a lateral and a medial paracollic button. You can see it? A lateral and a medial paracollic button. Yes? There is a lateral and a medial paracollic gutter. Yeah? Yeah, so when we're sick and say intestines was infected and all sorts of muck and so leak out, I'm going to show you that, love. Can I show 100% one in one? The fluid will drain when you're lying down from a higher. You see this level is higher. Can you appreciate that? To a lower level. Yes, it will drain down the noxious stuff. Will drain from a higher level along the paracollic duct, particularly the lateral aspect, into that recess there. And that recess is called the hepator. Liver is hepator. Kidney down here. Hepatorenal pouch. or the so-called Morrison's pouch, the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, Rutherford Morrison. Morrison with one R. Okay? So it is where the fluid will through, yeah? And we make use of this information because in instances where we are expecting much leakage of stuff following whatever the insult and surgery were, then the fluid will collect down there, yeah? And in some patients, we leave drains, what they call suction drains, inside of that hepatorenal pouch of Morrison to suck out all the noxious fluid that will gather there. You understand that? Good. Now, the general peritoneal cavities are what we are into. Okay. I'm showing you the ascending colon, yeah? This is the ascending colon. There are these little pockets of fat. The appendix is epiploid. We'll tell you about that in my future lectures. And on the other side, there's a gutter. On the other side of the colon, the lateral one and the medial one. I'm saying, when you're lying down, you see the pelvic rim is there. Yeah. So because of gravity, when you get leakage of from the injured structure, just say your liver or whatever, you see where now, just like in this instance, all the fluid will accumulate in that vicinity. And that vicinity where you see this fluid collecting is called the hepato. And that bulge here is the kidney. It's called the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. And surgically, we just say Morrison's pouch. You see the fluid collecting there when you're lying down sick in bed. And we say in those instances, we know when the fluid is going to leak. Sometimes we leave drains there for the fluid to drain out along it. Yeah? And sometimes we actively put in active suction drains to suck out the fluid. Yeah? Good. I showed you the lesser sac with my finger into the lesser sac. Yeah? I'm not going to dissect out the structure here today, but within the lesser sac, there's a double fold of 13 here, coming from the port of the liver, coming down from the port of the liver. And you should remember the structures right at this. This area is called the foramen of Winslow. You got that? The additus, or the foramen of Winslow, W-I-N-S-L-O-W. And let's define the boundaries first. Anteriorly, it's the so-called hepatoduodenal ligament coming from the porta, coming down to the duodenum. Yes. And within it are three structures called the portal tract structures. I'll tell you about that. So you got that? Winslow, W-I-N-S-L-O-W, Winslow. So that's the hepatoduodenal ligament anterior of the portal tract, yeah? Right. Posteriorly, let me show you. Can't really show you in the specimen. I would have to dissect it out. Yes, I think you can just barely make out a dark. Where's the light? Come on, Trippy. Yeah, from the yeah, here, just repeat. A minute to walk.
I'll have to.
Eh?
Let me check to see if the cord is disconnected.
That's what is the term now.
Can you guys still see the
Specimen. Are you guys hearing and seeing?
Are you seeing the specimen?
It can. There's nothing here. It's a can. Oh, yes, you can see on your thing, your monitor. What they say, they see. You see and hearing?
We can see and hear you.
You're seeing the specimen?
And are you hearing?
Yes, we're seeing and hearing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, good. So, you understand, I'm defining the boundaries of the foramen of windstone or the aditus to the lesser sac. And I had highlighted the processus vaginalis, which is an outpouching, finger-like outpouching of the greater sac. The lesser sac now is that inpouching on itself. And the posterior layer, if you can see back here, I don't know if you're seeing this now. Wait, the light there, getting on. You have to turn it on. Okay. Posteriorly, it's this structure, a big structure, but it's not too clear. And that's the inferior vena cava. You see it? The inferior vena cava. That's the posterior. So you got that? The anterior is the peritoneal ligament with the portal triad, and posteriorly is the inferior vena cava. Superiorly, it's they are going towards the porta, but they say the main thing superiorly is the part of the liver which they call the caudate process. This is the gallbladder, yeah? You not see that. Yeah, this is the gallbladder.
Right.
And this
camera is out.
Yeah.
Camera is out. So I just have to use this web guide.
What do you see? I don't see.
It should be seen.
Are you seeing this, the gallbladder?
Yeah, it should be seen. Just need one of that.
Yes, they're seen, yeah. Good. And this portion of the liver. Here, that's called the quadrate lobe. And there's another piece of the liver further up here. This is not a great specimen, which is called, this one popped off, called the caudate lobe. And it's attached to the rest of the liver by a process called the caudate process. So superiorly to the aditus now, it's going to be the caudate process there and the porta hepatis. This is the porta, all of the structure there. Yeah? And lastly, inferiorly, you're going to be having the duodenum. I'm going to talk to you about duodenum tomorrow. So this is the duodenum tomorrow. Yes, so there's duodenum there. Okay? So you get it? That's really fine, important. Aditus, promenade windsor, anteriorly, hepatoduodenal ligament. Posteriorly, the inferior vena cava. Superiorly, the caudate process with the porta hepatis. Inferiorly, the duodenum. Yeah? Good. Now, we like to ask you guys in the exam and other times, forever for instance, what's the relationship of the structures within the hepatoduodenal ligament? I'm not going to dissect it out, but most laterally is the common bile duct. Medially to that is the hepatic artery, and posteriorly to these two structures, Posteriorly is the portal vein. Yeah. So within the triad, these important things are laterally the common bile duct, medially the hepatic artery, and posteriorly to these two is the larger portal vein. Now, sometimes when we get livers that are injured or we want to be operating on the liver and there's much bleeding, what we do is push our fingers in the foramen of fingers, though like I'm doing there, and compressing it. And by compressing this, we cut off both the hepatic artery inflow and the portal vein inflow. Yeah. So the only other we say now is back bleeding from the hepatic veins. So the bleeding from the liver becomes less. And this process of compressing the hepatic triad to control or reduce bleeding goes by a famous name. I love when I was younger, and the bile too, yes. What is your favorite potato chip? The one that you buy within the tubes or cans or what? Right, it's called Pringles. Right. So that squeeze in there is called the Pringles procedure. You got that? You cannot forget that. Even shit all over. That's called the Pringles. One is Pringles procedure. When I was your time, at your age, we were told not to buy Pringles chips. And the reason was that the company was a South African company. And you know what South Africa at that time was with apartheid. Yeah. Right. South Africa, they were discriminated against colored people. Oh. So they said we should not support them by it. So that's the Pringles procedure, guys. Yeah. I know the close relationship now of the portal vein to the inferior vena cava. In some patients with portal hypertension, because the venous return is plentiful, but we're going nowhere because the liver is so congested and hard and cirrhotic, we can join up the portal vein to the inferior vena cava, so-called portocaval shunts. All right? Okay. Tastes good still, the Pringles chips, they're probably the best in my mind, but you should avoid it because they have too much salt. And I suffer from the problems of hypertension. I don't want to talk about that. So the large peritoneal cavity. Now somebody wanted to see the transverse colon. I'll show you the ascending one. And this is the transverse colon. Yeah. This is the stomach up here. This is big stomach of the pylorus. And this is the transverse colon with the omentum attached. Yeah. So when we lift up the transverse colon, you see that? When we lift up the transverse colon like that, yeah, it runs obliquely across, transversely across the peritoneal cavity, the greater peritoneal cavity. And when we lift it up like that, it now divides the greater omentum into the supra-mesocolic, above supra-mesocolic, and the infra-mesocolic compartment. Yeah. So there it is. Uh-oh. Oh, like. Somebody wanted to see the transverse.
Still seeing, right, guys?
And hearing, are you still seeing and hearing?
Yes, we are. Still
Good.
seeing.
Somebody wanted to see the transverse mesocolon. The colon is this guy. And this structure here with the blood vessels coming in. The structure which has been tampered and opened with. So these are all parts of the transverse mesocolon. There it is. So you see the transverse mesocolon, yeah? Transverse colon and the mesenteric carrying the blood vessels coming in. That's the transverse mesocolon. Yeah? Good. We showed you the hepatoduodenal ligament we did. Now within the supramesocolon compartment. Into the lesser sac. We can lift up a leaf of peritoneum like this, what I'm doing. See? Leaf of peritoneum. And that's the anterior leaflet of the hepatogastric ligament. The hepatogastric ligament is a part of the lesser omentum. We showed you the greater omentum, didn't I? Yes, I did. Here it is. This is the greater omentum. Now, this is the lesser omentum. It has two parts. The hepato, from hepato to gastric. That's a curvature of the hepatogastric. And the hepatoduodenal, from hepato to the duodenum. That's the hepatoduodenal ligament. So all of that is the lesser sac. And when you trace this now, when you trace this hepatogastric ligament, huh? I'm saying the hepatogastric ligament is a part of the lesser omentum. And the lesser omentum has two parts, the hepatogastric and the hepatoduodenal ligaments. You got that? And I went into detail of the structure of the triangle there. Hepatoduodenal ligament. Okay? It has no name with it. Just the hepatogastric ligament and the hepatoduodenal ligament. And the two constitute the hepatogastric ligament. As you can see, the free edge of the hepatoduodenal ligament is it's folded back on itself and just form one continuous edge. Let's get over here now. From the lesser curvature, the peritoneum, when it reaches the esophageal junction there now, it extends onto the stomach and esophagus. And at this point over the esophagus to the diaphragm, it's going, leaving from the stomach, as you can see here, this is the fundus, it's going to the liver and diaphragm onwards. And this portion now becomes called the gastrophrenic ligament. You got that? The gastrophrenic ligament. It's going from the stomach to the diaphragm. The gastrophrenic ligament. All of this structure. Yeah. Going down further onto the greater curvature, we leave it. And this structure now is the spleen. You studied the spleen or not seen it. This is the spleen. Very soft and friable vascular structure. And the peritoneum that extends from the greater curvature of the stomach. We said one part was the gastrophrenic ligament, and then this portion going to the spleen is called naturally the gastrosplenic ligament. Yeah, called the gastrosplenic ligament. And running with them are some short little arteries and these what's called the short gastric vessels. Yeah, within these are some small little vessels called the short gastric vessels, like in this one here. Very easily torn and fragile. Okay. And going on further from the stomach over this point here now, there's a strong ligament which has been partially cut where my finger is, that anchors the splenic flexure of the colon to the diaphragm right at this point here. And this is called the diaphragm, call it phrenicocholic ligament. And the phrenicocholic ligament acts as a seat for the spleen to sit on. Yeah? It's sitting on it when I'm standing. And then back resting on the rib cage there. 9 to 11 thread. Yeah? So that's the phrenicocholic ligament. And leaving from the greater curvature of the stomach to the transverse colon is this portion of the omentum which I'm lifting up and called the gastrocolic ligament. Yes, gastrocolic ligament. 2 layers running down from the stomach to the colon, transverse colon, and they leave the transverse colon, going down to varying lengths, even having down sometimes as far as into the pelvis. This fold which is called the greater omentum. Yeah. It's often referred to as the sleeping policeman of the abdomen. It's called the sleeping police of the abdomen by Rutherford Morrison. And what happened? This omentum, when there's anything going wrong in the tummy, the omentum goes towards that area, like in appendicitis or cancer or whatever that's going wrong. It goes towards that area and tends to ward and protect that area from the rest of the general peritoneal cavity. And that is why he's called the sleeping policeman of the abdomen, this greater omentum. And then it comes back up, fuses it with the colon, transverse colon. And from the transverse colon, you can see one leaf is going to reflect it over the pancreas, which is running that way. And all of these retroperitoneal structures and vessels, there it is, form the retroperitoneum. Okay. Now the inframesocholic compartment. When I lift up the small intestine like this, you're going to see where the inframesocholic compartment is now divided into a larger right and a smaller left inframesocholic compartment. You got that? So the inframesocholic compartment that's anterior to the transverse colon and transverse mesocholic. When I lift up the small bowel, it will separate this inframesocholic compartment into a larger right mesocholic and left inframesocholic compartments. Yeah? And I showed you and highlighted the right and left paracolic buttocks. And on the right side, they'll drain into the Morrison's pouch. On the left-hand side, they will not drain into the Morrison's pouch. Why? Because the phrenicocholic ligament here, which is strongly attached to the diaphragm, acts as a barrier to prevent it from reaching up to the kidney. Yeah? So it does not. Within the pelvis, there's one other thing I need to show you. This is the descending colon, and from the descending colon, you're supposed to have an S-shaped structure called the sigmoid mesocolon. See, it's stuck down here now. It's stuck. And then the sigmoid mesocolon continues into the rectum. It covers the peritoneum, covers the upper third of the rectum on its anterior and its front or anterior and sides, right and left lateral sides. And then to the third level of the third piece of sacrum, the peritoneum goes down over the rectum. And it's going to be reflected off. It doesn't go down to the side, just on the front, to the middle third of the rectum at the level of the third piece of sacrum. It's reflected onto the bladder. And this will now form the rectum to the bladder, rectovesical pouch. Yeah, rectovesical pouch. And then on the other side, there is a right and left pararectal pouches of the rectum. This specimen is a male. In the female, what intervenes in the female genitalia? The uterus pops up. On the other side of the uterus, just like my hands hanging out, are the two uterine tubes, and they have a fold of peritoneum on the other side, called the broad ligament. So in the female, the uterus and the broad ligament intervenes between the rectum and the urinary bladder. And because of that, in the male, this is just the rectovesical pouch. In the female, between the rectum and the broad ligament, posteriorly, will be a pouch called the pouch of Douglas. Yeah? You see, when you're lying down sick again, all the fluid that is down here now will leak into either the rectouterine pouch or the pouch of Douglas in the female. Anteriorly to the uterus, the peritoneum is reflected from off of the uterus to the bladder, and that's called the uterovesical pouch. Yeah. Lastly, on the peritoneum, because Mr. Gardner should, you did the inguinal canal and abdominal wall with Mr. Gardner, right? You guys had the abdominal wall with Mr. Gardner, didn't you? Yes. So, these two structures, I'm lifting up two structures on the lower half. This is the umbilicus, lower half of the posterior aspect of the abdominal wall with the peritoneum. What are these two structures? You see these two structures I'm lifting up? Sphericement. What are they? What are they? Did you see them? They're running towards the umbilicus. This, I'm not trying to trick you. This here is the umbilicus right here. See? The umbilicus is right there. And they're running right up to the umbilicus. One on either side of the midline. What are these? Right, the medial umbilical folds. What is not shown well in this? You're supposed to have a midline one called the median umbilical fold. Yeah. And more laterally, I'm trying to see if I can just about make out some outline of a fold here. This is the lateral to this now. Here's a fold, which you can't see, but what is this fold? You can just see the darkish thing here. You see a darkish thing? What is that? So if this is medial and you have a median which is not seen, and then you have another structure lateral, then it must be the lateral umbilical fold. Yeah, good. And these structures running in the lateral umbilical fold are these. So what is in the median umbilical fold? What is in the median umbilical fold? Right, obliterated remains, the urachus. And if you have to divide it at surgery, always tight off because it might have a lumen that communicates with the urinary bladder. So if you don't tight off after surgery, all the urine will escape into the peritoneal cavity. What forms this medial umbilical ligament? Right, the right and left obliterate region umbilical arches, right and left. And the lateral umbilical fluid is formed by the inferior epigastric vessels. What's the significance of the inferior epigastric vessels? This is the last talk about the vertebrae. What is the significance of the inferior epigastric vessels regarding inguinal hernia? Comes the Gardner debate. This is a revision. What's the significance of the inferior epigastric hernia? Inferior epigastric vessels with inguinal hernias or hernia. Right. The inferior epigastric vessels will tell you it's a direct or whether it's an indirect inguinal hernia. So an indirect inguinal hernia comes. What's its relationship to the inferior epigastric vessels? The indirect inguinal hernia is always lateral to the inferior epigastric vessels. Okay, that's on the right hernia or left hernia. Okay. Whereas the direct one is always medial to that indirect. This is always medial to the inferior epigastric vessels. Now you guys take a 2 minutes break because we need a 2-minute break for ourselves. For part 2 now of the stomach.
Spleen.
Yeah, spleen. A bigger one. Okay, when you guys are ready for me, tell me for the second part of the stomach. Are you guys back? Okay, it seems as if everybody's back. Good. Now, the second part of the tutorial, that is on the stomach. The stomach develops from the distal part of the foregut. Develops from the distal part of the foregut. In development, the entire length of the gut was divided into three parts: foregut, the midgut, and the hindgut, right? Now, where is the line of separation between the foregut and the midgut? We did some embryology on that. Yes? No? Nobody? Okay. The line of separation between the foregut and the midgut is in the distal duodenum. This is a small spleen and this is a stomach. This is the pylorus. And if I should open the duodenum, which I'm not going to open, about halfway down, we'll trail that when we get into the small intestine. About the halfway down on the second part of the duodenum, where the bile duct and the pancreatic duct enter into the second part of the duodenum at a major papilla, major duodenal papilla, which I'll show you in time to come. That's the line of separation between the foregut and the midgut, right? So you can see where the stomach is now going to be formed from the distal part of the foregut, or what ends about here. Yeah? The midgut now extends from this second part of the duodenum all the way down to the ileocecal valve. All of that small intestine, you see. And then it continues up along the ascending colon to the transverse colon. And when it reaches transverse colon, at about its junction with its right 2/3 and its left 1/3, that's the point of separation now between the hindgut, which is beyond, and the midgut. So you got those lines of separation, which you should know forever and ever and ever again. And having said that, certain things need to be understood. The artery of the foregut is what? That foregut, all of those foregut, that we show you. Right, the celiac trunk and its branches, right? The artery of the midgut is the superior mesenteric, very good. And the artery of the hindgut is the inferior mesenteric, very good. So you should remember this forever and ever and ever, right? Good. We talked about the development of the gut early with its ventral and the dorsal mesogastrium. Stomach portion has areas of the ventral mesogastrium still persisting. Most of the ventral mesogastrium of the remainder of the mid and hindgut has disappeared. So, if in an exam I should ask you what structures in the adult life are derived from the ventral mesogastrium, what would you say? You got the question? What structures from the ventral mesogastrium persist in the adult life or in life? right? One is the falciform ligament. Somebody squared the liver. No, the liver develops within the ventral mesogastrium. Right, I did not reinforce this to you, but I'm going to reinforce it to you. So, parts of the ventral mesogastrium. One, the falciform ligament. Two, the coronary ligaments, right and left, which I did show you, and the triangular ligament, right? And then from the liver downwards now, still of the ventral mesogastrium, you have the lesser omentum. The lesser omentum consists of the hepatogastric and the hepatoduodenal ligament. Okay. The ligamentum teres just runs within it. Ligamentum teres is the obliterated left mental vein. Yeah. It's not a part of the forefoot. So somebody want to repeat? The falciform ligament, structure developed from the ventral mesogastrium. The falciform ligament, the right and left coronary ligaments, the right and left triangular ligaments. And the lesser omentum, and it said the lesser omentum has two parts, the hepatogastric and the hepatoduodenal ligament. Good. Now, what parts of the dorsal mesogastrium persist of the forefoot? That's the forefoot, or within the forefoot. What part of the dorsal, not the break from ventral to dorsal? What part of the dorsal mesogastrium persists? That life. I showed you them, but I didn't highlight it. So seeing is one thing, but we don't understand it is another. Right, the gastrosplenic is one. Gastrosplenic is. Yeah, the greater omentum, yeah. Okay. Your phone system out here. The phone system or network has how many G's again? Guys, our network, our slow network. No, we don't reach 5 network yet, man. We don't reach 5Gs. We hope to reach 5Gs. America and those other places have 5Gs. So where are we? 4Gs, man. Yes. Why I said that? Because what I'm going to tell you is 4Gs. I mentioned the gastrophrenic ligament, did I not? Yes. Secondly, I mentioned the gastrosplenic ligament, did I not? Did I not mention the, which one did I say? The gastrocolic ligament, did I not? And then the greater omentum. So that's 4Gs, man. So make life easy for yourself. I'm not so bright as other guys. Oh, the joke in the class. So 4G, so that's nice and easy to remember. The splenorenal ligament is a continuation of the gastrosplenic ligament. Having enclosed the spleen, it then continues onwards to the over the cage of the gas as a splenorenal or splenorenal ligament. You got me now? You get me? So 4G, that's nice and easy to remember. So the stomach. You see in my hand? You can show my hand at me. Initially in life, yeah, the esophagus and the stomach dilated of the distal part of the forward. Is in the midline, separated, attached to the anterior abdominal wall by the ventral mesogastrium, and to the posterior one by the dorsal mesogastrium. Now, Dr. Barnett did the upper GI with it, did not. And he told you that there was a rotation of the stomach. You know what way did the stomach rotate? Eh? What way did? 90 degrees. depends on how you look at it. But it goes like that, 90 degrees, with the front anterior going that way, and the back side going the other way, right? 90 degrees. Now, when we don't want to know about the stomach, just remember number 2. Number 2. Mr. Gardner did mention that here. He's so good, you don't need to remember these things. You know? There is the number 2 when you think of the stomach. There is with some when I think of something, I think of you. Anyway, we think of number 2 in the stomach. 2. This has 2 ends. The proximal end near the cardia or gastroesophageal junction, and secondly, the distal end, the paddles going down to the paroidal junction. So, near its 2 ends, near its proximal and distal ends, the stomach is fixed. Where in the proximal end is the stomach fixed? I'm talking about a whole heap of tools, right? We said there are 2 ends, the proximal end of the stomach and the distal end of the stomach, yeah? The proximal end, and there's a little religion, you all know that Dr. Thomas is your friend, Dr. Roy Thomas, is a pastor. The pastors are hard in the exams. True, can tell you that for sure. Now, we're dealing with the 2 ends. The proximal ends and the distal ends of the stomach are fixed. And I'm dealing now with the proximal end of the near the stomach. What is fixed there? What is fixed? Is it the cardia that is fixed? Or what? I'm just trying to see if you understand things. You know? I'm trying to make you understand things. No, you don't understand. No, the cardia and the esophagus, there's abdominal esophagus, about 2.5 centimeters. That's inside of the tummy. It's not fixed, that's right. What is fixed is that portion of the esophagus that passes through the hiatus at the level of the 10th thoracic vertebra, just to the left of the midline. What fixes the esophagus as it passes through this? No? Okay. I'm going to tell you, you heard it, but you didn't understand. It's the phrenical esophageal ligament, or phrenoesophageal ligament. You read about that, right? It has 2 parts. What are the 2 parts of the phrenoesophageal ligament? Lining the thoracic cavity, especially over the diaphragm, is a fascia, strong fascia. And similarly, lining the abdominal cavity, especially in relation to diaphragm, inferior the belly cavity, is another strong fascia. And these 2 fasciae are collectively called what? Endothoracic fascia and the endoabdominal fascia. And they are related to the diaphragm, yeah, in this instance. So the phrenoesophageal ligament has 2 portions, the endoabdominal inferiorly and the endothoracic superiorly. The endothoracic fascia, as the esophagus through the diaphragm, it sends out a number of twigs which go superiorly for about 2 centimeters or so into the esophagus and help to hold it in position there, right? Similarly, the lower one of them, the endoabdominal fascia that passes, as the esophagus passes through the diaphragm, it's split into 2, a superior and an inferior component parts. The superior parts will pass through the esophageal hiatus and go as high as 2 centimeters component part of the end of thoracic. Yeah. Whereas the lower leaflet of the endo-abdominal fascia will go to attach to the fundus and portions of the greater curvature of the stomach. You understand that? So those are the further esophageal ligament of Allison. When you're gonna swallow food, you have a bolus in the esophagus, the long shear muscles pull that part of the esophagus up above the bolus. And then the circular muscles contract, push the bolus onwards. The frenal esophageal ligament will pull back down with relaxation, of course, of the long shear muscles. Pull back down the esophagus to be in its place. Yeah? Do you understand that? Good. When we come to the pylorus, beyond the pylorus, the first part of the duodenum, as I'll tell you tomorrow, there's peritoneum on either the side of the but duodenal ligament. So it's free to go back. Over beyond that, the other part of the duodenum is attached by strong connective tissue to the posterior abdominal wall, with the peritoneum overlying the duodenum. And that's how it's fixed. Yeah. Yes, I mentioned Reverend Dr. Thomas because the alimentary tract, as you will have seen from now, is that there's a statement in the good book says, as it was in the beginning, no, so shall be it in the end, world without end, something to that effect. Dr. Thomas said, put it better. So at the lower end of the esophagus, we have something holding the esophagus in its position. What about the upper end of the esophagus? We have something holding the esophagus at its upper end that will follow through the whole alimentary tract. As it was in the beginning, so it is in the end. I've shown you the end of the abdominal esophagus now. All right, as it passes through the appendix. What at the top end? What whole of the esophagus? So it will drop down. I know it's in continuous with the pharynx, but what? Is there a specialized thing? So make sure you understand things there rather than we just spit it out. At the upper end, Dr. Francis would, no, we're not in the center. Mr. Francis would have mentioned the word cricosophageal ligament to you. The entire, Shamari is remember. Remember, Dr. Francis mentioned to you the, as I said, ship again. Cricopharyngeal ligament. No? Yes, my longitudinal muscles. The crico. The thing there was the esophagus has two muscles circulating of the longitude. And the longitudinal muscles, as they approach the cricoid, come from the cricoid, they become separated into two bands, which are called the cricosophageal ligaments, which attaches to the cricoid, that strong cricoid structure. So it's attached up there. Yeah? At the point of the esophagus, you have a sphincter, right? The cricopharyngeal sphincter, is that right? What about the lower end of the esophagus coming into the stomach? We have a sphincter. Yes, we have a physiological sphincter. We measure the pressure, and the pressure there, and monometric studies is about 20 centimeters of water. 20 centimeters of water. The intra-abdominal pressure is about 1 to 2. The thoracic pressure ranges from minus to plus 1 to 2. That's why you know reflux. So we have a physiological sphincter. What are the mechanisms sphincter-wise we have at the stomach? Anatomical. Somebody mentioned crust earlier. Crust has a physiological anatomical function. It passes through. This is esophagus, and this is my right crust, which is longer than the left crust. It passes through, it contracts. I suffer from reflux, and I need to tone up my abdominal diaphragm by doing abdominal exercises. So that's another mechanism. That's two. Anything else? What about three? What about the presence of the abdominal esophagus? That has a functional sphincter action. Yes, my Dr. Francis told you, but you didn't understand. Make sure you understand things. The abdominal esophagus acts like the following. When we were little boys and the girls have the balloons blowing, we used to like burst the balloon, isn't that right? Now, if you have a balloon and you cut off, say a long balloon, you cut off the tip of the balloon and you blow through the balloon, would air go through? Yes, air goes through. And as you blow through, you see it waving, fluttering in the wind. If you try to pull back air through, it will not allow air to come back through. And from a physics point of view, engineering point of view, what valve is that called? It's called the flutter valve. So that's three, a flutter valve. Right. The sling of the oblique muscles over the cardiac pulse. Yes. And that's called the collar of Helvetius. And the oblique fibers sling over the cardiac. They have a pinch lock action beside the cross. The collar of Helvetius. So that's his four. What about the angle of entry? Fifthly, what about the angle of entry of the esophagus into the stomach? The angle. Yes, man. There's an oblique angle. And that oblique angle, when that happens, the fundus now rises up, and as the fundus becomes distended, it squeezes on the esophagus. Yes. So that's fifthly. Sixthly, a German anatomic surgeon, a lady, Dorothy Lieberman Gafford, described the circular fibers right at the cardiac there as class fibers. The girls will be more familiar with the class fibers than we guys. The girls have some clips in the ear. What do you call it again? Yeah, man, that clip the ear together. Like that. That keep your ear in position. I don't know what you girls remember those clips that you hold your ear in position. Those clips, that tight clips. That's the class fibers of Dorothy Lieberman Gafford. So that's the class fibers. Some of you girls use these fibers, yeah. These the clips in your ear, don't you? Yeah, man. Don't remember the name, but never did use. So those are the main things. Eh? At the lower end now, it's a sphincter, pyloric sphincter. Pyloric sphincter. And how do we identify this sphincter? It's thickened, but what else? What's running on its surface? You will see it here. What's running on the surface of the pylorus? Little vein running from the infrapyloric to the suprapyloric veins. And that's called the, what's it called? The prepyloric vein of Mayo, Mr. Mayo. Yeah. That's the Mr. Mayo, you know, in his operating theaters. This is the stomach, this is pylorus, you see that? This is the upper end. He found that by pulling down on the stomach like that towards the left in the fossa, that a portion of the pylorus right in this vicinity here would go blanch, would blanch. Mr. Mayo called that the anemic spot of Mayo. So two Mayos are associated here. And at this anemic spot of Mayo is commonly where you get the duodenal ulcers being formed. That suggestion is that poor vascularity, because the tension we need to hold your big food, like we Jamaicans have to do. flanges there. Superduodenal artery, that's all about tomorrow. Okay, now two things. It has two curvatures. The lesser curvature and the greater curvature. Yes, we'll come back to that. It has two notches. Stomach has two notches. What are the two notches? Right. One up here, you can see one here. This is the esophagus. This is the fundus. You can see one notch here. And the other never was well defined, somewhere right here. So this is the cardiac notch. And this is the angular notch, or the angular interstitial. Right? But suppose I said there's a third one. What would you say? Or can you say where it is? This is revision. Yes, along the greater curvature, down here, not usually in the specimens. There's another called the sulcus intermedius. You heard of the sulcus intermedius? Sulcus intermedius is there. Good. Now, having said that, if we draw a horizontal line like that now, right at the cardia, that part of the stomach, which is about right at this angle here, or notch, cardiac notch, this part is called the, what is that? The fundus, very. And that part, if we should draw from the angular intersuria, a right angle, to the greater curvature, this portion of the stomach in between will be called what will that be called? Right, the body. And beyond the body now, distant to the body, what do we have? Good. We have a pylorus, antral pylorus. The other, any other? Okay, this beyond now is further subdivided into the pyloric antrum, then the pyloric canal, and thirdly the pylorus. So this other part was divided into three. You got me? Pyloric antrum, pyloric canal, and then the pylorus. Okay. How do we find the angle, this angle? Because as you can see in the specimen or in the specimen, it's not too well defined. Okay. This is rather puzzling, isn't it? Some define it as where the vertical downward limits of the lesser curvature now intersects with the horizontal part of it, like here. Yeah. Okay. So that's as a guesswork. And then you draw a right angle from there to the greater curvature. Okay. Now, running along the lesser curvature, going to its blood supply, its arterial supply, we can see a nice arterial artery here. From the distal end, you see this artery here. This is the pylorus, eh? So this is the distal end of the lesser curvature. We see this guy here. What is this fellow? What is that? Right, it's the right gastric artery. See how small and insignificant it looks? And sometimes we even have trouble to find it small. Where does it arise from? I did this stomach already in the lectures. I know Mr. Gardner taught it well. Where does this right gastric artery come from? Very good, the common hepatic, which is coming off from the celiac. Okay. Now, if we look up here now, if we look up here, what is this? With me, we down the distal end, the proximal end as well as the curvature. We see a bigger fellow here. What is this? Right, the left gastric artery. Note how big it is to the right hepatic artery. And it's coming off straight from the celiac trunk. There are some other branches which they have dissected out. So it's quite big. Eh? So the left gastric artery runs, remember we had showed you the omentum, the less omentum, the hepatogastric ligament. It's running in the full of the, covered over by this hepatogastric ligament, and raises up a fluid called the pancreatic or gastric fluid. The common hepatic artery, which is not shown here, will raise up a fluid from which this arises from, called the hepatoduodenal fluid. Yeah, good. So the left gastric artery, what happens to it? Having running that fluid, running up towards the cardia, what happens to it? What happens to the left gastric artery? As it approaches the cardia, it differs about a small branches, which I can dissect out here, ascending, lower ascending esophageal branches. This is one. They go to supply the esophagus, about 2 or 3 branches. And the anastomose with the esophageal branches coming from the posterior intercostals in the posterior mediastinum. It gives off a cardiac esophageal branch, and then it approaches the lesser curvature of the stomach, as you can see here. And what happened at the lesser curvature of the stomach? What happened to the left gastric artery as it approaches the lesser curvature of the stomach? Classically divides into 2. This is for your learning. It classically divides into 2. An anterior branch. This is the anterior branch. And a posterior branch. Both will run along the lesser curvature of the stomach. But the posterior one will run like that. Giving off little twigs here. Little twigs to the lesser curvature. And end up by anastomosing with the right hepatic artery. Is that clear? Yeah? You see? Posterior branch run along the curvature. And then end by anastomosing with the right gastric artery. So what happened to this anterior branch? It runs along the lesser curvature of the stomach here. As you can see here, I want to dissect it out and mash it up. And it runs down. And in this vicinity here, in the region of the pylorus, You see it there? The region of the pylorus. What happened to it? You see the ending there? What we call this? It ends in the pylorus, as you can see, separate from the posterior division. It enters the vascular crowfoot. That's our crowfoot look. Enter the vascular crowfoot of pain. Dr. Pain. P-A-Y-N. You got that? The vascular crowfoot of pain. Yeah? You got me now? Vascular crowfoot of pain. So make sure you understand the lesson. Left gastric divides into anterior and posterior division. Yeah, posterior division ends up anastomosis of the right gastric, whereas the anterior division ends. Subline, of course, the lesser curvature. The two. Pain enters a crowfoot, the vascular crowfoot of pain. P-A-Y-N. Pain. You know, sometimes they say I'm a pain in your butt. We're gonna go past a little now because some of it's so long. Okay, so two main arches, left gastric, right gastric, on the lesser curvature. On the greater curvature, usually two main ones. And we can see some of them here. All right, this is the greater curvature. So this arch running along the lower part of the greater curvature. What is this arch? Vascular crux, crow, as in a jump crow. CROW, crowfoot of pain. Vascular crowfoot of pain. You got that? Right, this is the epiploid, that's the gastropiploid, that's the left gastropiploid. And the old time days, when we did that, they're all black and white, multiple choice. We would give you no answer because it's not the epiploid. It's a gastropiploid, it's not the left. But if it's a gastropiploid, it can't be in a mark in the old time days. We're marking harder. So they have to be specific in surgery. So this one is the right gastropiploid arch. Okay? It's going on as opposed with the left one, further up the line. Now, where does this right gastropiploid arch come from? Where does this right gastropiploid arch come from? Right. The gastroduodenal arch, which comes from the common hepatic arch. Gastroduodenal arch is divided into two. Right, gastropiploid, which is this, and the anterior, the other is the anterior, superior, and peritoneal artery. So the right gastropiploid runs along the greater curvature and runs up and runs up. And usually ends by anastomosis with its fellow, the left gastropiploid to form the artery there. Yeah? And where does the left gastropiploid comes from? The splenic arch. So we have two, right and left gastric arches. But there are two other named arteries supplied to the stomach. What are the other two? So we have only but two. What are the other named supplied to the stomach, right? The splenic, which are the, see we have a spleen here, no? Let's move down by this. And then this is the stomach. This is the tail of the spleen. Yeah. And we can see a number of little short vessels running inside of these things, running toward the stomach. These are called short gastric arteries. Very short and from some. Really easily. So we're careful and lightweight them at the time of surgery. Okay, short gastrics. Here they are. Here's one of them. Several of them. Short gastrics from this splenic artery as well. But we said two man. So that's the one short gastrics from the splenic. Maybe another artery will supply the stomach for completion. Mr. Gardner, I love this one. He told you about the posterior gastric artery, right? Again, from the splenic, supplying the posterior and the frontal parts of the stomach, but it's not very common. So, having told you all of those things about the blood supply to the stomach, we can't just leave it in the high and dry like that. The arteries that run along the lesser curvature of the stomach. You can see here, they're supplying to the arteries there. What sort of arteries are these? See them there, see them there. What type of arteries are these? What type of arteries are these? We believe that they are end arteries. We believe that they are end arteries. You know what are end arteries? I'm not going to go there. And why I mentioned end arteries, one of the operations to control duodenal ulcers is a vagotomy. And in one operation called the highly selective vagotomy, what they do, the vagus nerve run with these little arteries. So, I mean, you can see a little white thing and a little dark thing right there. So what they did was just to ligate these short gastrics. I mean, not the short gastrics, these little branches and arteries. And one of the complications they found in these patients were that they get ischemic necrosis of the lesser curvature of the stomach following that procedure. Okay. Now, the other ones, like these, the rest of this, the gastric products, etc., etc. They go into the stomach, in the submucosal layer of the stomach, which we can often call a vascular layer of the stomach. What happened in this submucosal or vascular layer of the stomach? What happened to these vessels? You guys with me? Drinking of coffee? Mr. Gardner mentioned the surety to you. I'm sure he did. Yes, these form within the submucous layer there, the vascular plexus, particularly in the antral region. The so-called arterial venous shunts of Alex von Haller, described them in 1740. He mentioned the arterial venous shunts, didn't he? He did. And it's very described by Alex von Haller the first. Significance of these. You know, sometimes you get mash up accidents and you bleed wholly and so forth. And to preserve your life, that is the coronary circulation, the kidney circulation, and your brain circulation. These arterial venous shunts shut off the mucosal flow to the stomach. Yeah? Divert blood away from the stomach. These arterial venous shunts. You understand? To preserve life. And this happens, particularly patients under stress. Now, the stress I'm talking about is real physical illness stress, not like a boyfriend, girlfriend breakup stress. Understand? Real stress, gunshot, stroke, heart attack, etc. So arterial shunt off are important to divert that blood away to preserve your circulation to the important parts of your body. Now, we will make you young in terms of work hard and get the patient back to normal. And you return the blood supply to the stomach. Now, when that happens, these shunts open up back, and the mucosa, which now starve of oxygen, going to start to gobble up the oxygen. Yeah. And when you gobble up too much oxygen in these situations, you got a phenomenon called reperfusion injury. You heard about reperfusion injury, right? In reperfusion injury, you get superoxide radicals being formed. Radicals are to kill bacteria out of such agents. And what happens, cells start to destroy cells. So the mucosal cells now are starting to be destroyed by the superoxide radicals. And you're going to start bleeding from the stomach in this situation. They call it stress ulcers. That's a nice situation for patient or surgeon or doctor. Yeah. Stress ulcers. And that's the significance of the stress ulcers. Okay. Now you hear people smoke and drink too much and they get cancer of the esophagus. Dr. Francis would have mentioned to you that in such patients, we're curative or need to make some good palliation. They take out the whole esophagus and put the stomach to the upper esophagus, to the neck. Yeah? A stomach bypass. He told you that, right? Now to get the stomach out into the neck. How many blood vessels are falling in we have to preserve? You with me? I've been told you all of these information. You're going to have to use application. So I wanted to start thinking. How many of these blood supply arteries that we need? We need potentially 6 groups of arteries. How many we need to preserve to get stomach survival cycle? And that's the most simple stuff in the neck. Huh? Nobody. You need just one. And the one that we preserve is this guy. The right gastric tract. We can divide the right gastric because, as you can see, it is of no consequence. Now, to get this up into the neck, so the left gastric is holding it here. So you have to divide the left gastric here. The short gastric, so divide them. We divide the origin of the right and the left gastric right. If there is a posterior gastric. And the stomach will survive off one, just one here. I will bring it up in the neck, and then that's the most the fundus to the esophagus. And you can swallow it, and that's easy again. Okay? So that is the significance of all of this blood supply. The veins will follow the name arteries, but the particular difficult one for you to understand is on the left side of the picture. Yeah, the right and the left gastric veins now become quite dilated sometimes, yeah? Particularly in portal hypertension. And when they do, the right one going to join it with the portal vein down at the bottom here, and the superior one with the portal vein at the top there. And so it looks like a crown. It's dilated here, and they call that the coronary vein. But as you can well imagine, the upper part of it, regarding to the left gastric vein, on a minute of it. So sometimes the clinicians will just use the word left coronary vein, but the left gastric vein. The right and the left gastric rights. So the left one going to drain it, and the short gastric going to drain it to the splenic. The right gastric right going to drain into a special arrangement which we call the gastropolyp trunk of Henle. I'll tell you that will reach the colon. So we'll tell you about the gastropolyp trunk later, not today. lymphatics. A guy by the name of Colin, COLLER, divided the stomach like that. Like that. So he divided the stomach longitudinally and divide the stomach into a number of quadrants. This quadrant here, you can see that from the thing in relation to the antrum. This is the region where cancer of the stomach comes before the gastric antrum. This is called zone 1. This is called zone 2. This is called zone 3. And this is the remainder is called zone 4. They're going to drain to the corresponding nodes, the gastric node, right gastric node, right, and left gastric node, short gastric nodes. So those are the adjacent nodes. Then they're going to drain to the intermediate nodes, to the splenic artery nodes, gastric nodes, and eventually go back to the celiac axis. You can tell the stomach, fortunately, it is getting less. But when we resect it, we'd have to resect about a distal 2/3 of the stomach all like that, and join up the proximal part with the jejunum. Okay? Now, we in the Western world, we just tend to remove what they call level 1 or D1 group of nodes along these vessels here to the stomach. Okay? In Japan, where cancer of the stomach is endemic because they have a high incidence of H. pylori. Cancer of the stomach is endemic, and they find it early. They not only resect the nodes along here, but they do an entire lymph node, intermediate D2 nodes, and the terminal group of nodes, D3 nodes. So they do extensive lymphadenectomy. In the Western world, we get a 25% fat in the survival, whereas the Japanese are getting 75% fat in the survival. Significant difference, isn't that right? And you've been told about Trossier's node, yeah? What is Trossier's node? Or so-called Virchow's sign. Trossier's node. What is Trossier's node? Mr. Gardner loves that. He told you about it. He tell me everything he did. Right, the left supraclavicular node. The cancer can spread as far as up there. The cancer of the stomach. So we talk about the artery, venous, lymphatic, the nerve. 2 nerves again. There was no thoracic abdominal esophagus and esophageal plexus. Coming down on them was the so-called, coming to them were the right and left vagal nerve. Is that right? From the plexus down, coming down, you have an anterior and a posterior vagus nerve. We tend not to find and dissect it out too well for you, but fortunately I did here. Why? This is the esophagus, yeah? This is the stomach here. And this is the peritoneum that was overlaid. This is going to form the gastrophrenic ligament. I've dissected it off and searched diligently to find the anterior vagal trunk. I have not searched for the posterior one, but at least they can say they see the dermal lumen, the anterior one. Now, both anterior and posterior vagal trunks behave similarly in that they divide into 2. The anterior one will divide into 2 branches. What are the 2 branches? Trossier's node and Virchow's sign. Yeah. What are the 2 branches of the anterior gastric trunk? very important in surgery. Peritoneal muscles. Gives the off one which runs along the lesser curvature of the stomach, yes. And that's called the anterior nerve of lateral shape. You've heard of that, right? And its other branch runs towards the porta hepatis, the hepatic branch. And that's nice and easy to remember the anterior, because it is often anterior and hepatic. And in the exam, sometimes you can't remember, like I always can't remember what the blinked answer is. And when we pass halfway down the line, the answer comes to your head, right? They say, know it? This is it. So I will tell you, anterior is right, so anterior gastric and the hepatic branch. Yeah. The posterior one will give off the two branches. Similarly, posterior gastric nerve, it runs along the curvature of posterior. And another branch. What is the other branch called? Celiac branch, to the celiac plexus. So that's nice and easy. Because you know the Jamaican will tell each other about their BC. Yeah? Or you hear some PC language to on the road common, you know it? Anyway, all of you have a PC in front of you, your personal computer. Don't you? Yes, you have your personal computer. So nice and easy to remember this. Anterior posterior nerve of lateral, we hepatic and celiac plexus, right? Now, we in this lesson world, we would identify the main trunk right by the cardiac of the junction there. Identify boom, cut it and tie it off. Send it by histology to confirm that it's the nerve. So we do a truncal vagotomy. But sometimes both anterior and posterior might behave similarly, that they might give a third branch, the fundus, so-called fundic branch. But the more problemsome one is from the posterior fundic branch. You might not see it because it might come from the main trunk high up in the thorax, so it comes down. And having done a truncal vagotomy anterior and posterior, if you miss a fundal branch, then the surgery is a failure. Right, Mr. Garner loved this, what they call this posterior branch of the fundus. It comes from the posterior. What they call that? Garner called that. He didn't tell you about the criminal nerve of Grassi. So that's nice and easy. PC, posterior, personal computer, posterior, see that. PC, posterior criminal nerve of Grassi on the posterior. Yeah. So that is how it is. Now, these nerves run down along the lesser curvature, and they give off branches which run with these little tiny branches of the artery. So you have to divide them. So some people dissect the whole vagal trunk from here all the way down, the anterior nerve of lateral, and divide all of these branches as they go down. Yeah. I showed you that. And how does the nerve of lateral how does the nerve of lateral the anterior nerve of lateral it does a crow's foot. The anterior nerve of lateral enters a crow's foot. So the crow's foot description was first following Mr. Payne, vascular crow's foot. You understand? So they dissect out all of this nerve all the way down with the arm. You understand? So they do that for both anterior and posterior. And that's called a highly selective vagotomy. They preserve the crow's foot, which is secretomotor to the anterior region, and they divide it into branches to the lesser curvature and fundus, which are the secretory fibers. Through truncal vagotomy, up here, will abolish all secretion, secretory, plus motor. And because of that, you have to do what is called a pyloroblasty or some other drainage, open the pylorus and pull it apart and stitch it up in a transverse direction like that, pyloroplasty. So that's the drainage procedure. Understand? You're all fed up of me. I'm not fed up. I could get on more, but you need to get your lunch for other adventures later. Any questions? I have to go tell Mr. Gardner, so you guys are paying too much attention to him now. Any other questions? Okay, before I leave, we talk about the duodenum also. And I'll talk about that tomorrow. But the gastric ulcer commonly occurs along the lesser curvature of the stomach. Because when you have food solid in where can I go? This up here should be somewhere up here. Yeah. It's like that. When you open the stomach, along its lesser curvature, this is lesser curvature here. There tend to be a number of longitudinal folds running down along the lesser curvature. What do we call that? Not just these gastric ruby in these folds. What do we call the whole thing? Is it about Magen Strassus canal? Magen Strassus canal. That's what it is. So food go down along it, and food reflux up along the lesser curvature along that canal. And along that canal is where you get gastric ulcers form. They tend to form right there where the incisura is, where the pyloric hydro is, and the body is. High acid, low acid, right at that junction. And more so, we have an end artery from these versus a plexus arterial supply, right at that junction. And also form there, and a benign also form and form and form. And ultimately it erode, get bigger and bigger and erode into the left gastric artery. So when you get a gastric artery bleeding, it's from the left gastric artery. And as you can well imagine, the aorta is right here. And you see how big it is, the left gastric artery. You can understand the massive bleed that occurs there. Yeah. Cancer occurs in the greater curvature. No more questions? Tomorrow I have that lecture on the small bone. No, the specimen is not indicating cancer of the stomach. All right, so I'll see you tomorrow for 9 o'clock on the small intestines. So have a good night.